Well, I can give you the Stoic answer to that one, which actually is shared by a number of other philosophies and regions, including Buddhism. I mean, Buddhism has come up a couple of times before. There's a lot of similarities between the two. In fact, I tend to think of Stoicism as the Western equivalent of Buddhism, essentially. So from a Stoic perspective, there is no universal meaning from tragedies like the one you're talking about. There is nothing big that comes out, no progress that comes out of it. What it does is you reflect on them, and you say, okay, those things are inevitable aspects of life. They just happen. And what you derive from it is, therefore, by contrast, a increased appreciation for the fact that there are still people out there that are good, that are trying to do good. You derive increased appreciation for the fact that you are still alive and you can do good to other people, right? So it's a question. I mean, the Stoics in general tend to reflect a lot on death, especially their own death, but not in a sort of morbid fashion. Death is simply a natural process. It happens. Unfortunately, sometimes it happens way before it should happen, probably because of human action. But it is a part of life. As such, you accept it as a natural part of life. And what you do instead is, that is a way to set it aside. Okay, it's going to happen at some point. It could be today. It could be next year. It could be in 10 years. Seneca says, live your life every day as if it were your last, meaning that you appreciate whatever you have. You wake up in the morning and say, oh, God, I got another day. And I can do something useful with that day. And that may take an infinite number of forms, including helping to avoid or forestall tragedies like the one you're talking about. You may or may not succeed, but even the attempt, even the fact that you're trying to do something about it, that is what makes it meaningful.
Yeah, and I think another way to make meaning from these senseless tragedies is to memorialize them. You know, the Civil War is something that we as a country are constantly creating. You know, it's part of our myth, like the story of America. We have this myth about the Civil War, the role that it played, the fact that these lives weren't lost in vain because this good was produced from that terrible loss. And so what story are you trying to tell? Dan McAdams, a psychologist at Northwestern University, looks at stories and how stories can kind of help people create meaning. And he's found that the most meaningful stories that people tell, in other words, the stories that people tell who rate their lives as the most meaningful, tend to be redemptive stories. So stories that move from bad things happening to good things happening. And there are a lot of classic examples of redemptive stories in our popular culture. You know, the rags to riches story, the civil rights movement is a redemptive story from suffering and bondage to liberation. And so what are the stories that we're telling? Are they redemptive stories? Is that one way that we can make sense of them? I think another way is to maybe broaden our understanding of the kind of meaning that we are making. So maybe there isn't legislative progress made right now, if that's your definition of meaning for this, but maybe there are other ways that meaning is being made so that those people who died did not die in vain. Maybe their stories get shared and inspire others, things like that. So to think of meaning in broader terms than just kind of political progress, maybe.